Kia ora tātou. Hopefully that's begun the meeting for everyone. Could I just trouble someone to give a thumbs up that you can hear us and see us okay? Kia ora, thank you. Well, really appreciate you joining us. My name is Carl Billington, and it's my privilege to host this morning. Really mindful of those of you in the greater Wellington region. So I hope everyone who's there is safe and sound, and just appreciate the time with us. We've made this online entirely today, so the presenters are all joining online as well. And so presenters, if at any point we're not keeping track with your flow, just let us know if you need the next slide. And for everyone's benefit, if we have any issues with connection, I'll let the presenter know and we'll ask them to go audio only. But really fitting, let's get underway with the karakia to begin with. Mauri oho, mauri tū, mauri ora, kia tātou, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. So wish you all well. Lovely to have you with us today. We'll go through the agenda. We have 4 presenters for us today. Firstly, we'll begin with an update from our Chief Executive, Sarah Gillies. And then we're going to take you to an update on the flexibility work that Siobhan is beginning to coordinate and pull together for us. And then we'll check in with Catherine from the Consumer Care Obligations piece of work with an update there. And we'll close out with Caro talking us through some of the work that's underway and approved billing. And as usual, if you have any questions along the way, you can use the chat or the Q&A function to drop them in. And at the end of each section, I'll relay any questions we have to the presenters for you. And as we always say, if you get off the end of the chat and you, I really wish I'd asked this, we welcome hearing from you. We publish these updates online, and so we can also take away any questions that we haven't had time to deal with there and respond back to you. So with that, let's get underway. Kia ora, Sarah. It's great to have you with us today. Thanks for making the time.
Good morning, Carl, and good morning, everyone. It's good to be here, and I hope everyone, as Carl said, in the Greater Wellington area, and I think Hawke's Bay and other areas are affected too, Central North Island, that everyone is doing okay.
Yeah, kia ora, Sarah. Sarah, it's been, I think our last quarterly update was in December last year, so there's been plenty that's moved on since then, but let's begin at the top. In our last update, we acknowledged that we were farewelling our outgoing board chair, Anna Kominick, and there's quite a lot of interest in the board appointments. So I wonder if you could give us an update on the new membership and how the board's focusing and finding their momentum. Kia ora, Sarah, thank you.
Sure, thanks, Carl. And yeah, I do often get asked by people about board appointments, and I'm sure most people have heard me say that obviously we don't appoint our board members. That's a process run by MB, and the appointments are by the Minister. But you're right, at the end of last year, we farewelled our Chair, Anna Kominick, and 2 other board members, Cristiano Marantes and Lana Stockman. And at the start of this year, we welcomed 3 new board members, Ben Bolo, Murray Parrish, and Tony Baldwin. And of course, Eric Westergaard, who's an existing board member, is our acting chair, and Paula Rose remains on the board as well. So we've had, as I say, 3 new board members. I'm sure many people in the industry will know Tony, who has been extensively involved in the industry for years, and including chairing our Market Development Advisory Group in the past. Murray comes to us from an industry perspective, which is fantastic to have sort of that major user, major consumer kind of perspective. And Ben is based in Australia and has a broad range of experience in the Australian sector. So it's fantastic to have 3 new board members, and we've been able to spend quite a bit of time working with the board as we gear up to that strategic focus that we have, setting up for the start of each new financial year. So we're right in that process at the moment.
Good, Sarah. And as you're starting to begin and focus on that forward work program, is there anything that you'd like to highlight for us at the outset?
Yeah, so it's, as I said, that sort of time where we gear up for the new financial year. So people will be aware we consulted at the end of last year on our levy, which includes a work program, and then we go through the process of developing up the work program for the upcoming financial year. And I'm working with the new board, refreshing our vision and our strategy. So people will have heard me talk about this already, but our strategy really is around reliable electricity at lowest possible cost for consumers. So thinking about how all the work we do drives for that outcome. And obviously, as people in the sector well know, we're not the ones operating the market. We're not, we don't generate electricity ourselves, but our job is to make sure we're setting up the conditions to make sure that things work and deliver for consumers. Our new work program and associated documents will come out in due course and help give people that sense of where our focus is, but primarily is around things that will make sure that the electricity system is delivering reliable electricity at lowest possible cost.
Thanks, Sarah. And within it, there's quite a lot of frequent discussion around the energy transition and the transition that's underway across the sector globally and locally here. What are some of the challenges that you see that come with the way the system's changing for us?
Yeah, so again, I don't think this will come as any surprise to people. You will have heard me talk about it plenty of times before, but essentially what we're thinking about is, well, what's going on in the sector? What are the biggest challenges that the sector is grappling with, and how does that inform where our focus needs to be? And so, as I say, it won't be any surprise to people the things that we're all talking about. We're talking about increased intermittent generation. We're talking about obviously there being less gas available. So the changing mix of generation means that we need to think more about how our system enables that shift. We expect to see increasing demand, and I think we're starting to see that. And so, as we electrify and increase demand, obviously there needs to be a significant amount of investment to meet that demand. We are seeing that, and we're tracking that through our Generation Investment Survey, which is really important. But we also have talked lots of times about the fact that with technology changes in an increasingly diverse system, we are seeing more consumer participation in the system, more distributed energy resources. All those sorts of things change the way the system works, increase the complexity. So all of those things are very important for us to be conscious of, and developing our work program to ensure that we are supporting that change.
Thanks, Sarah. And within that complexity, where do you start? So what are the authorities' priorities as we consider those challenges and what to address?
Yeah, so again, no surprises that there's a significant focus on strengthening the wholesale market. We've talked about that plenty of times, and there's work underway in terms of the wholesale market and how that continues to evolve. Ensuring the system stays secure. We've, for some time had a significant program of work in that regard, and that continues. Flexibility is obviously very important for lots of reasons, and I think you said Siobhan's going to be talking about flexibility today, so that I won't steal her thunder, but that's obviously a very important program of work. What have I forgotten? Network efficiency. Obviously, we've been working for some time on that, but the total system cost, and that if the system is more efficient, then the total cost is less for everybody. And the last one is being a strong, responsive regulator, which encompasses a lot of different things. But we've got a strong focus on monitoring and enforcement, and that kind of falls into that bucket.
Thanks, Sarah. And within that focus, I think there's some main key areas that we're looking at quite specifically. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we'll be more clear about our work program soon, but in terms of between now, so we're in that sort of funny patch where we kind of already focused heavily on the year that begins 1 July, but we're still in the current delivery year. So the things that are top of mind for us right now, certainly price rises. That's, we're conscious of the impact of price rises on people, and so we are focused on responding to that. The delivery of some of those significant wholesale market pieces of work that's upcoming. And I mentioned the sort of stronger regulator. People will be aware that the government's energy package included a piece of work around a stronger EA, and so we are working on that with MBIE as well.
Thanks, Sarah. Let's go to the price rises. I think many people will be feeling the pinch, and everyone's aware of the cost of living crisis and challenge. So let's chat a little bit more around what's happening in the pricing space. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I mean, we have had some estimates of what expected price rises are likely to be, and we think that's roughly about 8%. So, you know, that's significant. We are aware that a significant proportion of that is driven by the lines charge, but, you know, also aware that there are other components to that. So we are seeking information from retailers about those price increases, wanting to understand what's driving them. We'll be looking to publish and be transparent about that so people can understand. And overall, of course, we've got a program of work to help consumers in the sort of front and centre in the here and now in terms of being able to have choice and look at whether they can switch to save money, but also in the longer term with the sort of program of work that is all about placing downward pressure on prices. So things like those wholesale market changes, for example.
Thanks, Sarah. And that was the second signal for right now. We talked about that wholesale work. Let's chat a little bit more around what's happening in the wholesale space.
Yeah, so we've got some upcoming decisions in I think 3 key areas that I just wanted to highlight. One is the review of market making, and I think I'm just checking the dates, but I think some of that work is going to be announced, and by the middle of the year. Level playing field decisions, which people are well aware of. I think that's going to be in May, which is pretty soon, and that's obviously the work around non-discrimination obligations, retail price consistency assessment guidance, changes to uncommitted capacity, those things that we have recently been talking about. So those decisions coming soon, and some changes in terms of grid scale batteries. So some work on that, and a decision on that we expect to make that in May. So those are some of the things that are upcoming.
Thank you. And that third area of focus for right now that you signalled was some of the cabinet changes to strengthen the authority. Could you talk us through a little bit more about why the need was seen for those changes?
Yeah, so I think people will be aware from the government's energy package that, the driver for this is to have a strong backing for the regulatory regime. So there's been a lot of discussion about increased penalties and some other changes to our regulatory regime that essentially support the authority in its compliance and enforcement work with information gathering and those sorts of things. So the cabinet paper sets out some increased penalties, infringement notices, expanded information gathering powers. What else have I left out? Some potential changes to speed up code making as well. So obviously MBIE's the lead on that work, but we're working very closely with them.
Thank you, Sarah. And switching topics, it was brought home very much for me on my way home to yesterday evening, walking through the subway at the train station and seeing red panels everywhere with these wonderful little eyes from Billy. I'm really aware, as many others will have seen, that the authorities recently launched the new switching service. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and some of what we've seen there? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. So obviously people will be aware Billy is our new comparison and switching tool. We launched that at the end of March, and it's to support consumers really to have confidence in what they're getting. So the feedback we've had is that lots of people have been able to go on and either get confidence that they are getting a deal that works for them, or that they can save money and make it easy for them to switch. So yes, we're getting some really good feedback from people about how they found using Billy, and yeah, we're really pleased with that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. Sarah, those are all of the key themes that I wanted to canvass with you, but were there anything else that you wanted to signal in closing? Otherwise, we can go to any comments or questions people may have.
Yeah, I think just overall, there's been a lot of important work delivered in this financial year, and we're in the last quarter of that now, or just about to get into that last. We are in that last quarter, and so some significant pieces of work to come, but some big things that we've delivered. I did want to shout out to the industry in terms of the support and engagement on Billy. And our advisory group and lots of others who have helped us to be able to deliver that work. Those sorts of initiatives take a lot of work from across the sector, and I've said it a lot of times, but we really need to work together to deliver the change. And Billy's a good example of that, but there are plenty of other things as well.
Got it, Sarah. Thank you. Sarah, we don't have any specific questions for you. We have just a call out from Graham, kia ora Graham, who's just noted in the comments that there'd be an interest in some of the work showing increased demand. And so thank you, Graham. I've noted that and see if we can source any of that for you.
Yeah, let me check on that, Graham. I just read something the other day that said I think we're starting to see something. So I don't want to jump to the gun, and I'll get the monitoring team to be able to kind of back that up with the right information. But I think absolutely, yeah. And in terms of that question, Aaron Baker. Yeah, about publishing stats on numbers of users of Billy. We're going to be publishing some information, just working through the final details of that. But yeah, we're absolutely, we are seeing switching occur, which is great. But also, as I said, core thing for us is about consumers having confidence in the options that they've got. So for some people, that will mean that they are on the right plan for their household. But if they're not, it's easy for them to get information that will help them switch as well. So yes, absolutely, we'll be publishing information about how it's going.
Thank you, Sarah. And Sarah, Josh and the Q&A button has just dropped a question in. And Josh says, kia ora, Josh, thanks for the comments. Noting that at a recent forum, Josh indicates developers were concerned about the price of PPAs were not high enough to incentivize development. And so Josh is querying whether the focus on keeping wholesale prices down is the correct objective, or whether it's a bit more nuanced than that. Yeah. Welcome, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's there's kind of two sides to that, and I guess I understand the point you're making, Josh. Is really about incentivizing that investment that we need to see as well. So I think there's a lot we could talk about there, and I wonder if that's something we could come back to in a bit more detail. But yes, I mean, obviously, everyone's got a slightly different objective in mind for themselves. And ultimately, what we want to see is, yes, a lot more investment, but we also ultimately want prices to be affordable as well. And more investment will help with that, obviously. I can see a question from Alan Eyes too about updating on the work with the task force. Yes, we are expecting to be able to give an update on task force very soon, Alan, in terms of we came out and consulted and talked about what might be in scope of the task force for the future. So we're expecting to be able to give an update on that very soon.
Brilliant, Sarah. Sarah, that's all the questions we have at the moment. I really appreciate your time with us. And as we've indicated for others, if you have other questions as we get offline or close the meeting, please let us know. And there's a couple of things there we'll follow back up on. Thank you, Sarah. Have a great day. Yeah. Stay well and stay dry. Kia ora. We'll come next to, as Sarah alluded, the update on the flexibility work that's underway, and this has been led by Siobhan Bradley, who many of you will have met previously, but Siobhan is our flexibility lead, and Siobhan, it's great to have you with us this morning. We'll pass over to you. Kia ora, Siobhan.
Cool. Thank you, Carl. Just checking everyone can hear me okay?
Yep, loud and clear.
Yep. Awesome. Cool. So hi, everyone. So I'm going to give you an update on the work that we're doing to enable flexibility at the authority. So importantly, I'll cover off what it is, also why it's worth pursuing, why it isn't scaling right now, what we're doing about it, and then lastly, I'll just talk about some things that we've heard from stakeholders through an open letter that we sent. So to begin with, flexibility is about using electricity smarter. So it's about shifting when we use and generate electricity so that the system can run more efficiently. For kind of everyday household consumers, you might experience it as something like if you have a time of use plan, or maybe you've got one of these plans with like an hour of power, and you shift your discretionary loads to a time where it's cheaper. That's flexibility. You might also maybe have like a battery or an electric vehicle, and you might store energy for later. So consume the energy when it's cheap and then use it when it's expensive, or sell it to the grid. That would be flexibility. And then you could also think about it as things like if you were an industrial plant, you might have an agreement with the distributor that when things are looking really tight, when there's a constraint, that you would ramp down your demand and you would be paid for doing so. So in that way, we kind of can shift electricity around, and we can use it at the times where it's the most valuable. Still back on that last slide. So another part of the program is non-traditional solutions. And so what that is a traditional solution would be an infrastructure solution. So if you're a network, and there's an increase in demand, and then you find that you need to build the system in order to meet that new demand. Increasingly, we're finding that one way that you can either defer or avoid needing to invest in that infrastructure is by using a flexibility solution. So what that means is that you can shift demand away from the peak using these types of solutions with solar and batteries and so on. And that is one way that we can kind of have more efficient spend on networks. Next slide. Cool, thank you. So I've got this really beautiful, not in any way hand-drawn daily demand curve here. And so I wanted to demonstrate kind of what ultimately flexibility seeks to achieve. And that is that what we're trying to do is to smooth out demand and bring down peaks. So we know that we use most of our energy in kind of the morning and the evening when you're kind of having your shower and cooking your breakfast and then coming home and having dinner. There's a little bit more in the middle of the day, but those are our main peaks. And the system is built to meet these peaks. So if we can do things that shift some of our demand out of those peaks or move some of our supply into them, then we should be able to kind of right-size the system or build a smaller overall system and use it more efficiently. We can get more utilization out of the existing system. And what that does is keep costs down in the long term for consumers. So next slide. And so why do we want to do this now? Well, this demand is only set to increase with electrification of kind of fossil fuel-based processes. And at the same time, the solution to that increase in demand is also there. We know that homes, businesses, and communities are increasingly owning assets like generation, rooftop solar, and batteries. And kind of, if they can participate in the system, then they can help to shift some of that demand and they can be a part of the solution. And they should be rewarded for doing so. We also know that with increasing renewables in the system, that there's more variability because they're intermittent. So flexibility can help to plug some of those gaps, and it can be a solution when output drops or demand spikes. We also know that there is a big network build coming. There's more than 2 billion in distribution system growth costs coming. So if we can defer or avoid some of those costs, then that should help to keep bills down in the long run. And then we also know that there's a lot of flex in the system. EECA's most recent study on demand side flexibility estimated that there was 1.9 gigawatts of flexible load that's kind of latent in the system right now that we could incentivize to participate. And we also know that that there are different participants who are trialing some of these flex solutions and they're starting to get legs. So they're going from pilots to scale, and we want to help to accelerate that progress. All right, next slide. Cool. So, so if it's so amazing, why don't we have a perfectly flexible solution right now? So what we're hearing from stakeholders is that the three key barriers they're experiencing are, one, that price signals for flexibility are hard to read and act upon with confidence. So that means that it's kind of unclear exactly what flexibility is worth. So it's difficult to invest. The second thing is that it's hard to pull these solutions together. So especially where it involves, if you're a flexibility provider who's aggregating lots of small batteries, for example, and having to orchestrate them, control them, and make sure that they're all communicating, then that is quite a difficult thing to do. And then there's this perception that flexibility is not dependable. So when you compare it to traditional solutions that have been around for hundreds of years, like poles and wires, these kind of new innovative solutions come with some perceived risk. But we think that it's worth persisting to break down some of these barriers. And so, next slide. So what we're doing about it. So currently, we're doing some work to try and make that value clearer. So doing things like improving pricing and making it easier to see what flexibility is actually worth. So these are through things like our mandatory time varying tariffs or time of use tariffs. We're also working to make participation easier. Some of you would have heard about our Power Innovation Pathway, where we're working with innovators to identify barriers or perceived barriers to participation, and helping to work through those with participants. And then we are also working to build confidence. So we are doing things like exploring making information about network constraints and capacity available so that people can identify where these opportunities are on a network and so they can invest in flexibility. And we are making our expectations really clear on the role of distributors in competitive markets. And we've also recently sent a joint letter, which I'll talk about in a minute. Having said all of that, we know that there's more work to do. So our Flexibility and Non-Traditional Solutions work program aims to fill some of these gaps. So yeah, the last thing is that I wanted to flag that in our market brief today, we are publishing some feedback, the summary of submissions to our open letter. So we sent an open letter with EECA and ComCom about how distributors can better support efficient use of non-network solutions because they play a really key role. And in short, the main things that we heard were that people broadly agree that non-network solutions can play an important role. Especially when growth is uncertain and investment is deferrable. I've just got a cat coming on screen. I'm just going to move her aside. Thank you. But it's still, they're still seen as a bit more risky than traditional solutions. And so what stakeholders wanted us to do was to work on improving the clarity of price signals for flexibility and building confidence in the sector. So we hear you. And next slide. We would love if you would come along to our public workshops in May. We acknowledge that those closest to the problem often have the clearest insights. So I'm calling on all those people with a stake in Flex, innovators, consumers and their advocates, distributors, retailers and technology providers and others. We're having a series of roundtable workshops in May and we would love if you could join. You can register your interest at flexibility@ea.gov.nz or have a look at our website for when these different workshops are. Thank you.
Apologies, Siobhan.
That's all right.
Myself. Awesome, thank you. There are no specific questions for Siobhan at the moment, but I really just want to tautoko Siobhan's invitation to get in touch and engage and join this conversation. And you've got the flexibility email there on screen. If you missed that or want to engage later, we'll be publishing the slides to pick it up again then. But Siobhan, really appreciate your time with us and the open invite. Oh, sorry, one question's come through. This I don't think will be so much a question for you, Siobhan, but a question about whether there'll be MTR decisions coming through, which have an enabling contribution to some aspects of Flex. I don't know if you have any visibility you can update on yet, or else we can take that one away.
No, I might have to take that one away and find out what the plan is.
Let's do that.
Thank you.
And kia ora, Alan. Alan's asked a question, Siobhan, about whether we can reconcile the suggestion that EDBs may pay for demand response, but the suggestion that the authority's taken away a direct peak signal with the new TPM. So the interplay of those two things. Yeah,
I'm aware of that as an issue, but I think probably, these are the kind of views that we want to collect. So come along to the workshop. The more that we hear statistically about issues that people are experiencing, the better. So yeah, come to the workshop, please.
Yeah, and you're really genuinely in that issue collecting phase.
Yeah.
So if there are other key issues you're not hearing from us or seeing tabled, please take the opportunity to do that. Yeah. Awesome. Kia ora, Siobhan. That's all I think in the chat or the comments. Really appreciate your time with us. I know we'll hear from you again along the way. So thank you so much. Have a great day in the meantime. Let's come now to Catherine, who's going to talk us through the guidance that's coming and a bit more clarity around the classification of medically dependent consumers. So kia ora, Catherine, over to you.
Kia ora. Welcome everybody on this wet day in Wellington. I'm sure there's people from all around the country though that are a bit drier. I am just going over today some issues that were raised in a letter that was sent to the retailers about a month ago from our CE around medically dependent consumers. And we just wanted to follow up on that because of the importance of the issue, I think. And this issue came about because we have been seeing some concerning trends in two key areas. And one is retailers not flagging a person as medically dependent while the required process is underway. And this is where the design of the scheme is intended to ensure it's quite a low threshold at the beginning, just while you get further information. It doesn't mean that you have to accept everybody, but there are some important timeframes that perhaps haven't been fully understood. And the second thing is just to ensure that any disconnection of a potentially medically dependent person is reported to us as soon as possible, which means minutes and at the most hours, sort of not the next day. So the way that the consumer care obligations are designed around medically dependent consumers is to have a relatively low threshold for just putting on a flag. And that makes sense because you might not be able to get full information or verify things for a while. So it means that from that point, the protections apply while further information is obtained. And I'll go through those steps. You'll see in the slide there that the threshold that I'm particularly talking about is if a retailer becomes aware of information that a reasonable retailer would consider indicates that a medically dependent person may be residing at these premises. So that it's really only information you're aware of. It only has to indicate, and it is just and may be residing. So it's really if there's an indication. When I go into the next slide, I'll be able to go through this in a bit more detail, but retailers under the process aren't really having to take a medical view. This is the key entry point. Once you think there is some information that indicates a potential medically dependent person on an electric device, then there is a process for how that gets determined. It's also important to understand that it's not really based on particular conditions or particular devices. Ultimately, the only judge, once an application process is started, is a health practitioner if you've got doubts and want to get that level of verification. And I could give some examples. We had one where someone who was dependent on an electric bed, a medical bed, was not even flagged while those further inquiries were made. And actually, it was something where if there wasn't electricity, they wouldn't have been able to move or get out of bed. It would put them at quite a lot of risk if there was a fire or something like that. So again, it's just important to enable, give an opportunity to get more information from the person. So once this threshold's met, once you're aware of the potential issue that there's a medical device and the person's saying, I do need this, and it's critical, you do need to then request an application for medically dependent consumer status. And that application can be in any form. It could be verbal or by email, or you might have a form you ask them to request. But you're required under the obligations to do that as soon as you can, once you're aware. And that is a different form than a confirmation of status form, which is the form that goes to the medical practitioner. It may be that a retailer gets the information in an application, whether it's verbal or in writing, and you're satisfied and you record the person as medically dependent. The confirmation of status form is really just optional for the retailer where you've got some doubts or where you want to have just a bit more clarification. And I think it's important. What we have seen is some retailers just sending the application and confirmation status all at the same time. It is important to get the information, consider whether that next step's required. Getting a confirmation of status from the health practitioner is a cost for people and an extra stress. So where it's clear that they should be recorded, just to think about whether or not that's required. If we go to the next slide. So this is sort of a flow chart of how the process works. We will be publishing a bit more guidance following on from that letter, just to help people navigate their way through. But the first one is this relatively low threshold. If you have doubts, we would encourage people to err on the side of caution. But again, it's just something if there's a reasonable indication that they could potentially be medically dependent on an electric device. Once you are aware, the protections do kick in and you're not allowed to disconnect. You should flag the person while you get more information. And you then have to request an application for medically dependent status as soon as practicable. That request should go to either the residential customer, if they are the NDC, or to the consumer themselves living in the house. And there are requirements where it's a consumer living in the house to get those alternative contacts and additional information there. The consumer can make an application in any form. If they don't make an application in 21 working days, so that's 3 weeks, the retailer is then entitled to not treat them as a medically dependent person and take off the flag. When you request an application, you must make it clear that if they don't respond within 21 working days, that might happen. So I think there is and then if the consumer does make an application, that's recorded by the retailer, and at this point you may have enough information just to record them. Then it's optional. If you still have doubts, still want some more information, you can request a confirmation of status form, which is a form that needs to be completed by the health practitioner. Importantly, once someone's made an application, a retailer cannot decline it unless certain things have happened. And one of those is that the confirmation of status form comes back from the health practitioner and says that they don't meet that test. The second is if the consumer doesn't provide a form within 21 working days. If that happens, you do have to re-request and wait another 10 working days before removing the flag. One aspect that's missing from that flowchart that we will add in, just note when we have got a bit more room on the page for the guidance, is that when someone makes an application, so that's just the when they've made an application before they've made a confirmation of status form, a retailer can refuse an application if that consumer doesn't respond at all within 20 working days to any follow-up questions that the retailer has, or just doesn't communicate at all. And just importantly, the retailer may choose to record a medically dependent consumer status at its discretion at any time. And look, this is a priority area for the authority and for enforcement. So it's really, really important that people get this right. And I guess the other thing around the consumer care obligations for medically dependent people in particular is that it only provides the right safety net if every single obligation and the whole package of requirements are all followed. That, if just one isn't, it can lead to, serious consequences. So it might seem, just making sure that you let them know that they have 21 days or whatever might not seem on its own to be a critical step, but it is, because it does rely on everything threaded together. So the second issue we're seeing is just not getting reports of a disconnection from a medically dependent person. Retailers must not, there's a prohibition on disconnecting its post-pay premises, not prepay. There are other requirements around prepay, of course, of just making sure that if someone is MDC in the premises, then they understand that prepay is probably not the best for them. But for post-pay premises, if you know, which is again just having even an indication that a person might be living there, it is important to understand that a disconnection is prohibited. If you find out that, if a retailer finds out that someone has been disconnected contrary to that prohibition, it's really important that they comply with a requirement in the code to let us know as soon as they become aware of that. And that should be, as I said earlier, minutes or hours at the most, using the prescribed form. If you are unsure whether you're deemed to know, we just recommend erring on the side of caution, and we're happy to discuss that with you. And lastly, you're required to reconnect supply without delay if the person at the premises has made an application for medically dependent consumer status. So we're probably going to look at correcting the code to make that, if you're aware as well, but at the moment it's just if someone's made an application, understanding that you have to ask someone to make an application. It can be verbal as soon as you're aware, and this can be even after disconnection. So if after disconnection someone lets you know that there is a medically dependent person residing at the property and they want to make an application, and you contact them and they do, you do need to then get them reconnected as soon as possible.
Thanks, Catherine. And we just have one question from Monica. Kia ora, Monica. And this may be something only a medical professional may be able to assess, but the question from Monica is whether consumers on sleep apnea machines should be flagged as medically dependent. Monica notes that there seems to be some varying retailer practice on this issue.
Yes, I think if the person says to you that without that equipment they would be at risk, then it shouldn't just be based on the equipment. It's really difficult to know the individual circumstances and the particular condition that a person might have, and that's why the system isn't really designed to just sort of have black and white answers. What you do, the requirement for the retailer is to flag that person just while you make further inquiry. So you might want to get more information. The information they provide might be such that it's clear it's not really critical, and then you unflag them, but because you don't think that. But if it looks like it is more complicated, I would, but you still have doubts, you can ask them to get the confirmation, a status form from the health practitioner, who will be able to say yes or no whether this is something critical for their particular condition. So it does mean having to flag that person and not disconnect them over a period of days and the time frames, but that's just an initial low threshold protection while you find out more.
Brilliant, Catherine. Thank you. Catherine, that's all the questions we have at the moment. But if others have more questions, more information, what's the best way to connect or get in touch with us?
I think if you go through our CCO email, which is on the website,
Perfect.
there should be some information at the end of the flyer pack as well, possibly. Yes. And just be aware that we will be expanding on the letter that went to the retailers, including that flow chart, and we'll probably also look as a next little standalone guidance with some case studies, possibly one on just disconnections, not to do with MDCs, about the number of contacts and things, because we are getting some feedback where there's a little bit of confusion there.
Perfect, Catherine. Catherine, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate you dialing in with us. Stay well out there. Kia ora. And we'll come next to the topic of improving electricity billing and the work that's underway there. This has been led by Carolina Rodriguez, who will be familiar to many of you. Caro, great to have you with us today. Thank you for joining in.
Hi, Carl. Lovely to be here. I always love coming here. It means that we have reached an important milestone. So yes, here we are to talk about improving electricity billing in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Well, the first thing I would like to shout out to everybody, and Sarah already talked about it, but we have achieved two very important projects within the authority that are critical consumer touch points. So one is the comparison and switching service. Billy is out there supporting consumers, making better choices and having better value for consumers, and also improving consumer billing. That one was all part of the Consumer Mobility Work Program, in which we had different projects. Some are the foundations, some were enablers, and these two consumer touch points. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background for the people in the call that didn't know. But as part of the consultation process, we typically put out a consultation paper that the industry kind of has access to. But in projects that are more relevant to consumers, we want to hear from consumers directly. So we did survey type of engagement, and we heard from more than 1,500 people. And that's important because, sometimes we miss that voice that is really important to us. And so we did it in 3 steps. And I just want to give you a little bit of a flavor for the responses we got in those 3 steps. So the first step, if we can go to the next slide. So the first step, we ask consumers if they agreed or disagreed with the following statements. So we said, it's hard to find the information I need on my bill. Trying a time of use plan feels too risky. It's hard to know if I'm on my best plan or in the cheapest plan for my needs. And I have received a big catch-up bill that was based on all estimates instead of an actual use. And we got the following results. So over half of people found it hard to find information they need on their bills. Nearly half agreed that trying a time of use plan feels too risky. Almost 90% found it hard to know if they were on the best or cheapest plan. And a quarter had received a big catch-up bill at their homes or businesses. As step 2, we asked consumers to share with us things that they liked and things that they disliked about their bills. And it was interesting that, some people said that they like the graphs, they like the breakdowns. Some really like the clarity on their bills, and they found it really easy to understand and read. Some shout out it on all the apps and all the new ways in which consumers are engaging with retailers and are having access to daily data. And some mentioned that it was really clear to see the cost and the charges. When it came to things that they disliked or that or things that could be improved, there was the themes of plan clarity. People wanted to know their plan names. They wanted to have more details on the types of charges they are paying. There was a lot of feedback on GST, and they all wanted to get GST inclusion. And they said that was really confusing, that some retailers had GST, some didn't, and they found really hard to compare from bill to bill. And the other big theme was suggestion for retailers to disclose if people could be on a better plan. And as a step 3, we ask consumers if they supported the proposals we put in the consultation paper. And we got over 90% of consumer support for all the proposals. We also, heard and did a lot of analysis and a lot of reading from all the retailers, industry, consumer advocates, and other stakeholders that responded to the feedback. And again, I want to pause here and shout out to all the industry and all the stakeholders that responded with a wealth of information for us to make better policy and make better code. So that was really, really clear, the feedback they gave us. So thank you all for your support and for the great information you gave us. Basically, consumers need clear information and better plan advice to help them respond to price signals, and that will make demand-side competition work better. But we did make some changes to our proposals following the feedback we received. The key, I want to bring the 2 key changes that we made from the proposals to the final decisions. We standardized minimum mandatory information on bills rather than having a very prescriptive bill. Sorry, go back to the first one. Thank you. And so we're only mandating a very minimum amount of information that will help consumers to be able to compare. And then the rest of the standardization will happen through principles. And the other change was doing an annual better plan advice instead of every 6 months and outside of bills to help consumers making it more visible, improve effectiveness, and reduce cost. So the board made decisions in February. We announced them in March, and now we're in the process of doing guidelines to support retailers in the implementation phase. We had, Carl, a very good workshop yesterday. Some of the people that are here in the call may have joined us yesterday. We had a 3-hour workshop with industry, really constructive feedback. And so now we're doing exemplar bills to support consumers with, to support retailers with really clear, graphic design on how the bills could look like, and comprehensive guidelines on what the expectation is. In particular for the principles, but also for, it's going to be comprehensive guidelines for all the code changes we made. So what are the changes? So in the way we see them, the changes are kind of 4 big pillars. The first one is standardizing billing. So again, mandatory information upfront, and then design principles to make the bills clear, comparable, plain language, and a logical layout. Again, we're going to provide a toolkit with exemplar bills and guidelines to support retailers to understand how those principles work in practice. And then as a second pillar, we have better plan advice. So we're requiring annual review on better plans to encourage consumers to switch and save within the same retailer to the best plan that retailer offers. We're also supporting time-varying plan adoption by giving advice to consumers on how to make the most of that time of use plan. And how that works is after 3 months of the consumer being on a time of use plan, the retailer needs to provide further advice on how to make the most of that plan. What we see is that some consumers switch to a time of use and they are very motivated at the beginning, and then, we're busy people, we set and forget, and we forget to really ingrain those behaviors that help us save money. And prohibit termination fees for switching plans within the same retailer, with some exemptions. The third pillar is to encourage consumers to compare. And so we are strengthening the consumer care obligations to provide better plan advice when they reach out to retailers with more billing-related issues. We're also requiring retailers to publish a catalog with all their plans available to that customer. And we are mandating the prompt to go to billing. And the fourth one is we're limiting back billing to 6 months, and we are also mandating some proactive measures to reduce the likelihood of the back billing in the first place. So how are we going to measure success? Well, we are going to use the framework that was already introduced with the consumer care obligations, and so retailers are going to have to go through the same compliance statements that they are on the CCOs and follow that. But apart from that, Carl, we also want to track that we are, that consumers that we're improving outcomes for consumers. So we already have some annual perception and sentiment surveys, and we want to track how consumers are, feeling more supported by the retailer and having more confidence in the electricity market. We're also going to use some of the retail market monitoring data and getting evidence from UDL on the likes of issues that might resolve, like we want to see less back billing disputes and so on.
Perfect.
So I just wanted to bring here for all of you to see how we are tracking some of these projects within the consumer mobility framework that we saw in the first slide. So the product data standards and the billing improvements, they all come to place on the 30th of October. Billy is live, and of course, we're going to keep improving it. And then the time of use requirements, the backstop measures come into effect on the 1st of October. So I wanted to kind of bring that, the key outcomes and milestones for each of those projects.
Thanks, Caro.
And that's me.
Yeah, awesome. And we have just one question from Multi, Kia ora Multi, who's asked whether there's any obligation for retailers to offer multiple plans in order to better plan advice to customers, and what happens if a new entrant chooses to only offer a single plan. Welcome any comments, Caro, but Multi, I believe it'll be up to each participant what they want to offer as their competitive offering. The work that Caro and the team are doing is making sure that how the information of those offers is presented becomes easier and more accessible to the consumer. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add there, Caro?
Yes. Hi, Malti. Thank you for your question. Look, within the obligations, absolutely. Some retailers offer multiple plans, and you can offer up to 3 plans within your offerings. You need to use the previous consumption of the last 12 months of consumption and run the numbers for consumers, and based on that consumption, how would the retailer be better off?
Awesome, Caro. Thank you. Just aware that we're coming to the end of time, and kia ora, Robert. I just wanted to note your question regarding Billy and their KPIs. We don't have any of the Billy team with us at the moment. I'm aware they've got really strong processes behind the scene that are testing the robustness of that data. But if something went wrong, what are the provisions there? Let's get the answer to that question and loop back. For everyone else, really want to respect your time. And again, just for those of you who are managing adverse weather, all the very best and stay safe. And a country is connected to ours, even if we're not affected, we all know people who are. So just mindful of that. On that note, let's close with the karakia together, and we'll have the presentation published shortly. And we've noted the questions and comments, and we'll take those to away to follow up with. And kia ora. Thank you, Robert, and got that clarification too. Awesome, team. Let's close out. Kia whakairea te tapu, kia wātea ai te ara, kia tūriki whakataha ai, kia tūriki whakataha ai. Haumi e, hui e, taiki e. Kia ora tātou, really appreciate you joining us today. Stay well. See you again soon. Hei kona.